All right, good morning. So when asked to moderate this, I was asked to put together some questions. So I have very selfish questions I put together of information I wanted to get from the group. This is not a shy group, so please feel free to jump in and interrupt and ask anything we're not covering. So with that, we have an hour, so I want to make sure we get into it so we can cover as much as possible. And Joanne touched on sort of the first question I had here is, one of the first departments that adopted social media everywhere is marketing, communication, and the universities as well. I know at my institution. But we're seeing it now becoming adopted more by student life, career services, alumni services, and in the classroom. How are your institutions using it? How are you seeing it grow?
Well, I have to say, in general, I think that, I see social media as this huge, kind of ocean of unstructured information. And I think most institutions are just sort of, standing on the edge of the beach and dipping their toe in. I think there are very few places that have really developed a strategy, for thinking about social media, and really thinking about the audience. What audience am I trying to reach? If you go out and get a Facebook page for your institution, that's a very broad piece, and you're not likely to attract the audience that you want, because the audience is looking for, what's in it for me? Why should I, get involved with your social media if it doesn't, have some immediate payback? So, the more narrow and focused it is, I think the more payback you're going to get from setting up some kind of social media presence. So just in general, I was thinking about this when we were asked to talk about this, and so it seems to me that a lot of what institutions are doing with social media is the sharing information, the kind of pushing information out. Sort of what was brought up yesterday is using new technology to do the same old business. So you're putting out something on your Facebook page about, well, here's the deadline for admissions, or here's the the next testing date or whatever. So just pushing out information. There's not a lot of interaction, and really, what social media is really about is that interactivity. But I don't think a lot of institutions are really taking advantage of that. I mean, we have multiple Facebook pages at UMass Boston. IT has multiple Facebook pages at UMass Boston. And a few of those are interactive, but a lot of those are just putting information out and not, generating that kind of discussion. So, I think we haven't necessarily done as good a job with coming up with a strategy and really figuring out what's in it for the audience. When you look at, I think the more disruptive or potentially disruptive things about social media are when you do get it involved in the teaching and learning activities, when you really use it. I think a lot of discussion now is about flipped classrooms, where instead of the students coming in and, being lectured in class and going out and doing homework, that you use the social media to, do that kind of learning outside of class, and when you come into class, you're actually working on problems and, getting the benefit of the instructor. And I think that social media kind of makes that flipped classroom possible. And that's something that I see as very potentially disruptive to the, what we see as the traditional model of education. And I think for faculty, too, one of the ways that this is being disruptive is in terms of scholarship. That the digital publishing and the online peer review, it's not that, being published in the, the Journal of Archaeology or whatever isn't still important, but that's no longer seen as the only way, to get your ideas out there and to get discussion going. In some cases, not even the best way to do that, because publishing has a very long time lag. If you really want your ideas out there, you put them out there in a digital way and you get feedback right away. So I think there are lots of different areas where you can look at how higher ed could use social media, and there's a few where they actually are using it.
I want to start off by giving some background on myself so that the context is clear. I worked at Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut for 23 years, then decided to move on, and I went to a completely different place at Pace University in New York, 6 different campuses, a very different culture, and then came back to Wellesley after a year at Pace. It's got nothing to do with Pace, it had to do with my leg. Okay, and I couldn't keep up with the driving from Central Connecticut to Westchester. So I'm going to mix it up in terms of my experience in all 3 places. I think it's very important to realize that we should never start off with a solution and find a way to fit it in terms of what we are trying to do. Social media is one where we get caught up in that loop, that this is a solution and we are always seeking a problem to fit it, and that will never succeed. And that's where I think a lot of the institutions are struggling. Instead, we should go back and ask the question, we're in the teaching, learning, and research business. What is working well, what is not working well, and start from there to see what aspects of social media can help us solve that problem. I think there are some schools where this has succeeded exceedingly well. There are a couple of schools where they're using Twitter as a feedback mechanism for learning outcomes. Are people understanding what's happening in the classroom? Because some students are shy about raising their hand in the class and answering a question. And somehow the social media tools give them a cover that allows them to be more empowered to answer the question. So I want to set the stage that I'm of the belief that strategically we should come up with that question and then begin to answer. So going back to Wesleyan, social media is very broad. It's anything from Facebook to Twitter to LinkedIn to, I don't know how many of you know a tool called Orkut, which is a Google tool, very much in use in India and Brazil. I have no idea why. So it's a very broad spectrum. If you take blogs, one could argue it's a two-way interactive social media tool. Wesleyan's president is very tuned into this. He's a blogger. He writes for Huffington Post. He's a scholar. He has a very active blog on campus. So when I was there, when we were redesigning the web, if you go to Wesleyan's web, it is fed by a community blog. That's a very active community blog. And when the president stands there and says, we're going to use the community blog, and we're not going to worry too much about the fear of people putting up crap there, I think it sends a message. And there was not much of crap that people were putting in this blog. So, and then he also was tuned into YouTube big time. Every university now has a YouTube and iTunes U, and it was very strategic in ways to connect with the alumni of the college, and all of these things. When people understand as a way of connection, it becomes very successful. And Facebook, it started with the marketing, admissions, the usual suspects. At Pace, it was very different. This is a place which is very tuition driven. As a result, you really need to respond to what the students are asking for. And there, the social media use was very, very different. It was actively being used in the classrooms in many ways. The problem of when to use, what to use, is all restricted by all of these alphabet soup of laws that are being thrown at us. It's the FERPA and this and that. You put it all together and you tell the faculty these prevent you from doing certain things in the social media, creativity gets crippled. You have to constantly think about what is it that I'm going to be held responsible for, if I do this wrong. okay, becomes consuming, and then you give up. I could care less, and therefore I'm going to dump, okay, using this. So there, we purchased a product called Integral, okay, which is a very nice product in that it shields. It uses Facebook, but it still gives, okay, a separate space, okay, for conversations within Facebook. It integrates with your ERP so that you can form class-based groups within Facebook, okay, etc. So combining some of these tools that gives you that shell to work with and using the strength of the social media are good ways to do it. I came to Wellesley where problems are very different. It's a women's college, okay, and social media tools have by default, okay, location-based services, okay, and this becomes an issue, okay, from safety perspective, okay, etc. So we are a little bit more careful about institutionally blessing some of these tools, okay, for our use.
Great, great. And I would say from, again, a little bit of perspective on my background, I work with Kaplan Higher Education, or Kaplan Inc., and primarily what I oversee is the technology. The largest part of our company is the Kaplan University Online, which, we have about 80,000 students online with different challenges. We do have the traditional campuses all over, mostly career colleges, and so different animal, but the online university brings a lot of challenges in that you have a very dispersed student group of all different types of students across the world, military and, mostly working full time. So it's a matter of convenience is mostly what we're after. And what we found early on, of course, marketing was all over Facebook. We were all over Twitter, leads and doing all that kind of stuff. But really the students pushed us into, you have to be there. If you ignore it, the conversations are happening. We found particularly in our world, the biggest challenge for Kaplan University, probably a lot of institutions, is financial aid process, painful. We found as anybody has a white text box in front of them, they can ask any question they want to, they start mostly complaining or trying to understand about the process of going to Kaplan in this particular instance, and really forced our institution that was very resilient, or not resilient, I should say, against change. And we fight that all the time as far as really wanting to help. They're scared of social media. They're scared what people are going to say, although they're saying it. The education has to be, well, that's fine. You don't want to know what they're saying. Sort of like avoiding going to the doctor. They're saying it. Do you want to know what's going on or not? Do you want to try to help or intercede or make things better? And that's really where we've been starting to adopt the social media in all different aspects of what we do. Again, we're 100% online, so it's a very natural fit within our LMS. But again, the other thing we learned was the tools we were providing traditionally and online. I mean, we all know the providers, the Moodles, the Pearsons, the whatever LMSs you're using. And so you're going from the way they're used to adopting technology, their Gmails, their Google Apps, their Docs, their Twitters, their Facebooks, and then giving them this old LMS, this discussion board, this heavy thing. So we're finding is we're being forced that it's a negative experience now, so we kind of had to turn around. How do we leverage the tools that are out there? How do we leverage the scale of these large social players out there? You can leverage their infrastructure, you can deliver their tools, and really do it on the cheap as far as what we're doing. Plus, it provides a better experience in the classroom. And we're really starting to dabble there. We're working a lot with Twitter and Facebook to figure out how do we improve the social graph to understand how they're interacting with each other, how to understand what they're doing at homework. And for us, our major focus is retention. I know, but that's why I live every day, is how can we leverage these technologies to understand and help stay relevant with these students. And so we'll talk more about that as we go through these questions, but that's sort of...
I think one of the interesting things that I've seen places doing is kind of layering social media on top of administrative applications. Like you have a housing application if you're a residential school, or you have various kinds of admissions applications that are tied into your ERP system, and you can do an online application and so on. But there are some places that are using that kind of layering. There's a good example. Some of my colleagues out at Loyola in Chicago have set up a social media place for students who are already admitted, but haven't accepted the admission. And they, help them create communities and get to know the place and sort of make friends with other students who are thinking about going to that school, and they've gotten some remarkable results in terms of their what they call the melt rate. The students who are accepted but don't actually come to the university, and they found that's a tool that's that's really helped them. And I think that brings up another point that you kind of alluded to is how do you measure success in using social media?
So kind of going to the data point, and the next question is, social media is bound to generate more data than ever before how students and their behavior both inside and outside their college life. How is your university preparing to capture, make sense of, and apply this information to the institution's mission?
Well, there is such a thing as a clout score, which I just found out about recently, where you can kind of count, the number of times that you get retweeted and the number of responses to your post, and you can come up with this clout score. I have to say, I don't think we have measured our clout score. We do look at the number of friends we have on Facebook for our various pages and things like that. But, I don't think there's been a lot of work yet on coming up with those metrics of whether or not you're successful at doing this. There is the sense that you have to do it, because certainly for colleges and universities, that's where your audience is. If you're not there, you're not really talking to them. But in terms of, how do you know if you're really successful? I think the Loyola experiment is one, or they had a very specific goal. They had a very targeted, audience that they wanted to meet with that. And so they were able to say, okay, yes, this has helped us achieve a certain result. But I don't see a lot of those kind of measurement things in place. And maybe you have more, but...
Yeah, so again, to go back to the example of PACE, there are many companies that are out there who sell products that produce dashboards of not just social media, but the activity out on the web. I think that's far more important, for an institution to understand, including social media, but that only measures what's public, because they can't go beyond that. So they'll be able to tell you what the Facebook activity is. Is it, they produce a meter to show is the buzz positive or negative, and if it's negative, if you drill down, you can get to who is talking, who is bad-mouthing you, so you can target that person, to, get to, etc. So these are very valuable tools, but frankly, I think we need to be realistic about this. We don't even have a sense of our own data within our own ERP system. How many of us know at any given point in time how many full-time students we have? Okay, we don't. I mean, definitions are all over the place. Okay, so I think this is where most of the schools are struggling, that with all the budget cuts and the resource crunch, where do you put your efforts to try to understand the happenings on? And one area is, how is our web being viewed? The reputational risk, aspect of it is important, but also we need to worry about, are our classrooms being used efficiently? So I think analytics, as EduCause would tell you, is a big piece of where, we need to be engaged in. And I think this whole social media analytics is only a small part of that, because what gets talked about in some of the media out there are things that you can't do much about. RateMyProfessor.com. If you start responding to it, because you're watching what's going on there and responding to it, you're basically putting yourself in the position of claiming there's some legitimacy to it. So you need to be very careful in choosing and picking what is it that you want to watch and how you want to respond. Twitter is a good example where big companies watch this big time, and the buzz is watched to such an extent, if anything bad at all happens, they push people at the problem to get it solved. And we don't have the resources like that. So in other words, if you're watching something, you need to have a response plan, and we don't have the resources for both.
Right.
So,
Well, and I think part of it is, as you say, watching it. You know, in a lot of places, they haven't yet, you know, so that isn't anybody's job to watch it. You know, there may be somebody in the communications department who is tasked with doing posts to various media, but you know, that doesn't work very well if you're just, you know, every now and again putting something out, or even if you put something out every day, if you're not really watching it and interacting with it. And I think so far in a lot of universities, that's nobody's job to do that. And to be effective, you do have to watch it, you know, and somebody has to be paying attention if you notice those trends, even if you don't have the tools to analyze all of that unstructured data. If somebody is in there watching it, they at least get a sense of what the trends are and what the hot topics are, and you know, they can be feeding that information back. But in a lot of cases, you don't even have that person who's doing that, with or without any technology tools that might help them analyze the data.
Can I ask a question? I mean, that was great. I love that, and it was brilliant. You said nobody's job to do that, but it's interesting. I mean, there's these social media tools actually gives you an ability to touch the marketplace, which is something that universities, I'm trying to be nice here, but sympathetic, really weren't designed to do.
Yeah.
I mean, like, for example, you know, I don't want to put Olin on the spot, but like, they're on the cusp of getting a chief marketing officer.
right.
Right? You know, but not only is it nobody's job to do, I mean, the organization was not designed, it wasn't even included in the core DNA. I mean, so you're talking nobody's job. I mean, what response could there be? I mean, people are, I mean, if you use Penn State as an example, they're pissed off about what's going on in Penn State. What do you do? I mean, like, you know, the presidents of the universities, are they, I love the fact that you have yours blogging and that type of stuff, but most are not, they're dealing with other, you know, I don't know, plate tectonic type of, like, time frames. I mean, so what do you, I mean, here you are, you're creating all this good data that has no place to go and no action to take.
Yeah, it depends so much on the institution. Okay, so if you really look at some of the, you know, premier liberal arts colleges, we are already getting 8 to 10 applicants for every available seat. What is it that you want? Invite more people to apply just to say no? Okay, this is a very tough question. So, okay, so from marketing point of view,
I mean, the
right?
airlines basically said the population is growing faster than we can visit
Right.
off.
So, yeah. No, what I'm trying to say is, so the marketing need to be, what exactly are you trying to do? Okay, and then ask if social media can play a role in it. So let's say you take PACE as an example, right? You want to put your name out on Facebook because you want to attract more students. But have you thought of how is it that new students who don't know nothing about PACE are going to discover you suddenly, okay, on Facebook? Is not clear. So, you know, I think the question needs to be asked first before trying to fit the social media as the answer.
But it's not just a question of attracting students. I mean, there's also branding. I mean, just like a company, and it's a question of attracting a certain kind of students, but also attracting a certain kind of faculty. I mean, at UMass Boston, for example, you know, one of the big strategic initiatives is to raise our profile as a research institution. You know, we certainly have a reputation as a teaching institution, and we grew out of, you know, teachers' colleges, normal schools in Boston. But now their goal is to really have people think of them as a research institution. So, you know, that marketing effort, including social media, you know, to the extent that we're trying to be strategic about that, focuses on that to an extent. You know, if we want to attract faculty who are really hot researchers in areas that we're interested in. I mean, we're very proud of being an urban school, you know, so a lot of our research focuses on areas that serve the urban communities, you know, public health issues, environmental issues. So we use our blogs also as part of when we redesigned our website. Only we don't have a community blog. I mean, we feature a different blog every day.
Yep.
You know, and it's a way of pulling in people who are doing interesting research, you know, and writing about it. You know, so I mean, that's just a tiny little piece of a, you know, kind of strategic marketing effort. if we want to be seen as a research university where, people who are interested in that kind of research are going to say, oh, that would be a good place to be. So it's not just, we need more students, because it's not exactly like we need more students. I mean, our enrollment has gone up from 12,000 to 16,000 in the last 5 years, and it's continuing to go up. So it's not just attracting students, it's sort of, creating your brand and how people in the community think about you, and truthfully, how donors and funders think about you. As the state support goes down, you have to look at other ways of attracting money. Researchers bring in money. Corporations, can bring in money if they see you as the kind of institution that they want to support. So, some of your marketing is geared at that.
And I would say, I think this is one of the areas in which for-profit differs.
Mm-hmm.
We very much understand our data. We use it every single day. We know how many students we have. We know why they left. We know what they're doing. We run it every day. I mean, we're a for-profit organization. We understand these things. We don't have the limits of being online. We don't have the limits of enrollment. We're an open enrollment university. So some of those things people criticize as far as, what we're doing in our industry in general. But on the other side of things, there's a lot to be learned there, because what we've done with big data, specifically in social media data recently, is we've gone from asking the question of why did they leave, because we knew that. We can tell you what our retention rate was, and we can tell you here are the things that they did, and so we saw that. I can tell you why they left. Now we're trying to understand how can we get there, get actionable data at the time it happens, and respond to it as it's happening. And we've launched some minor projects using social. Some failed spectacularly, and but we learned from it, so we're really trying to get out there and test. We launched one of the big things for us on retention is career services, because largely what we're focused on is, okay, one of the major drivers of our institution is you go here, you get a better job, better your life, and move on. So career service is a major piece of what we do. Not only that, but our accreditors and Department of Education really likes to know how well are we getting people jobs with their federal money. And we launched two things. One, we launched a career services social platform on our platform where students could go in, and we staffed it with a lot of career services people. They can go in real time, see what they're doing, and help them with their resume, and get our jobs posted on there, and give them kind of mentoring and capabilities. And we launched a tutor network, which was while you're in class, go here, ask questions, and we have a bank of tutors. They're going to go in and read it. We're going to forward it on to the proper person. We're going to answer your questions in line. But also, we allowed students who demonstrated mastery in these subjects to also be part of this network and help out, kind of help out. The career services thing has been fantastic. We launched it across the board, great accolades. We're seeing placement go up and really seeing satisfaction of students. The mentor thing, not so much. And the reason why is because in-school students didn't really want to talk about classes. What they found is we had so many barriers to access, and the rest of our institution, I mentioned before, financial aid, student accounts, registrar, whatever it happens to be, they used that box to ask those questions. Everybody flipped out because nobody was staffed to answer it, and they shut it down. Now, became another problem. Once we shut it down, the people that are legitimately using it outcry on the public networks. So now on Facebook and Twitter and everything else, our students are like, oh, you're shutting down, you're crushing my health. So then we're forced to respond to it. So it was a very eye-opening lesson of you can't make these decisions anymore. You can't control anything, because people were scared about, they're going to ask those, I mentioned it before, they're going to ask those questions anyway. And the other thing that we've been able to do most recently, and this starts small, I have a challenge when I being from the developer in me, in the software development side of the house, is I'll go to business owners and say, what do you want to do? And it's the boil the ocean thing. It's like, oh, I'm not going to accept anything we do in Facebook or social media until it's absolutely the perfect thing I have in my mind. And when you wait for that, it's moved and it's gone and you never meet it. And guess what happens? We have very long projects that go way over budget, way over time, never get done, become an example of how you can't get something done. So finally we were able to talk to a small team to focus on this, and we launched one thing using data, and it was we've noticed, at least in our institution, as activity-based. So if you go online, how many minutes? Two things: how many minutes are you spending in class, and what's your discussion board post size? Small little things that they're very obvious. If you don't do those things, you're probably not going to be successful. And instead of looking back at it next quarter on why these students left, say, oh, right here, they weren't active in class, that's why they left. Now we are using, tools that are out there, very cheap. We throw all our data up at Amazon and Crunch, and we could tell you, as soon as somebody misses an assignment, or as soon as somebody gets too close to a deadline of an assignment, we're reaching out to them on our platform saying, hey, we noticed you missed your assignment, but here's a link to our late turn-in policy. We're here to help you. Here's a number to call. And we're seeing some pretty good movement there. I mean, just being able to take data while it's happening, use the infrastructure that's out there today to allow us to mine through that and not just find out about it after the fact, but be able to the same day. I mean, every day it takes us, 4 hours to crunch through all this data of all of these things going on and then send out something that's actionable.
This is very interesting, of course, but I think the struggle we all face in terms of the data is one of legacy. I need to be careful now that Dave Wiedemann is here. He's going to tweet everything I say. So the culture of the place and how data is interpreted by different offices and the whole legacy. We have always reported it a certain way, and we are reluctant to change and take a look at the data differently because all the longitudinal comparisons, will be thrown off. These are all real issues that we struggle with, which there's no one person in the college or university can crack the whip and say, all right, everybody is going to just fall in line one day, and we are going to start measuring the data. Because there's a legitimate reasons why you can't get it done because of years of looking at data in a certain way. So, yeah.
You mentioned Integral before. So the next question, there are plenty of social media vendors out there, and they pop up every day because there's an opportunity. And it's sort of like, kind of the .com days when everybody needed a website, so everybody was a web developer. And, everybody's selling websites, right? Same thing's going on. Like anybody who can go to the Facebook network and understand how to use Connect will build you a website to be social. Some are large companies, while there's startups trying to make their big sale. How are universities assessing the value of these vendors? And how are you weeding through, like, you're using Integral, what does that do for you? But, how do you identify, personally, me, I fight, I shouldn't say fight, but, I get told almost on a daily basis, from one aspect of our company, like, we need to just move our classroom to Facebook, 'cause that's where everybody is. There's a million, potholes there, that we can't do that. They're just impossible and impossible, right? But how do you assess these, and how do you separate out the solutions looking for problems versus what problems you're trying to solve for these?
This is not just unique to the social media product. I mean, any product that we look at and purchase, we go through the process. I mean, the process is fairly simple. You look for your peers, for advice to see if anybody else has done. Integral is a good example where Arizona State first worked with the company, and there was an EDUCAUSE poster on how, using this tool, they were able to measure a definite improvement in retention rates. When you see a poster like that, your interest peaks. And we checked with ASU folks. They were very impressed with the software. And so, these are all new ventures. You need to, at some point, as a CIO, you need to make a decision, and you're putting your name on the line by choosing this. Therefore, you need to do all the due diligence, which you do, and pick. And, the way they present themselves are all you can pick up signs on who's real, who's not for the most part. Another criteria I have used in the last 5 years is if I bought a product, I'm sure within the next 6 months Blackboard is going to buy them.
Blackboard or Pearson, yes, that's true.
Everyone I have bought, Blackboard has come back and bought them. So it's a good sign.
I think for us, IT hasn't really bought any of those applications. The few that we have really been driven by the business units. Either the communications marketing department looks at something and then, we'll work with them if they want to implement something. Or, in the case of, we do have some of the retention data products, but it's enrollment management that has driven that. So really, we try to partner with the business departments who are looking at those and, want to get involved with those products. But I haven't personally gone out and pushed any of them, and usually if a vendor calls me about that, I send them over to enrollment management or student affairs, because really if the business unit doesn't see a use for it and isn't going to be engaged in it, I'm not going to push it, so.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say that.
John Chickering with Fidelity. So, actually, from the standpoint of the more traditional, four-year higher education infrastructure, how do your communities work together? So, you've got in the classroom learning area, you have the administrative pay the bills, make sure the heat's there, all that sort of thing infrastructure. If you're either a research university or developing that research president who's got that, as we've learned, hospitals are now holding wedding receptions.
Right.
So it's taking this direction.
Yeah.
How do the various, I'll use important terms here, tribes in your world drive your thinking, and who's got the mind share? How do you align into strategic direction? How do you figure out where you want to? You've got. I'm hearing limited resources.
Mhm.
How do you go through that calculus of making those decisions to where to invest and how to invest?
Well, I think one of the interesting things, one of the reasons I really like my job is that IT is almost the only area within the institution that touches all of those places. So, the person who runs enrollment management sees a lot of things, but doesn't necessarily see what's going on in the classroom, for instance. But between me and my staff, we're involved in all of that. So I think that's really one of the great roles that a CIO can have in the institution, is to be able to bring together those different tribes, within the institution. And, a lot of that has to do with how you set up a governance process. We are actually just putting in place a more mature, I'll say, initiative review process. Because it has in the past been siloed. It's gone through the budget process, and that's one of the few institutional structures where all of those areas are brought together is, in the budget review. But it still tends to be kind of siloed, that athletics will have certain initiatives, and within athletics, the budget group may make decisions about what they're going to fund, but they're not really measuring what athletics wants against what, the dean of the College of Liberal Arts wants. They sort of look at them. So we are trying to design a process where, all of those proposals come together and get ranked against each other, and looked at in terms of the university's strategic goals, but we're not there yet.
So there's two roles for social media in that little discourse that you shared.
Yeah.
One is for, we need to invest in social media for the football team or whatever.
Right, yeah.
The other is the use of social media to actually drive the discourse.
Yep.
Yeah.
And are you seeing movement in either of those sides?
From my space, to answer your first question, the resource management takes place through governance in most of the cases. Okay. In terms of discourse, it's always very difficult as to finding a single medium, where this can take place. Almost all the colleges and universities have an email-based system that people are wedded to. They are listservs. Typically, there's one for the community where anybody in the community can post, and there's one separate for faculty, staff, and in some cases, there's one for just tenured faculty. They are siloed communication vehicles that continue to thrive because it's a change of culture to move from there to moving to social media. On the other hand, students are not waiting. Students are already on the social media. In many colleges, the students' participation in the traditional vehicles has gone down dramatically. And the others are worried about this. Where do we hear students in a common place? On the other hand, students claim that their view of social media as a space where they want to separate that from, what happens in the college comes in the way. Okay, so looking at social media as the place where discourse needs to take place is, happening in some places, but not for the reasons that I said up front. Very few institutions will stand up and bless that, okay, because of the risk associated with being out there in the public, okay, discussing things that we consider are internal, okay, to the institution. This is a culture. There are no technical validity necessarily to this, but this is how people think of, okay, social media or cloud-based solution as the place to hold discourse on the college matters.
We're seeing more use of wikis and blogs, not so much Facebook and Twitter, as sort of public social media, but within the university there's more wiki space and blog space discussion about those issues. When we worked on strategic planning, for instance, we spent a year last year, and really worked on engaging the community, and those were the tools that we're using to get feedback about, are these really the goals? And it was actually very controversial, thinking about, shifting any kind of balance between being a teaching university and being a research university. So there actually was lots of social media discussion, but it was mostly internal to the university, not on a public social media, so to speak,
And, we moved to Google Apps for Education for the entire college, and we are looking at Google Plus as a vehicle for being able to do that. Unfortunately, Google makes a distinction between certain tools as Google Apps tool versus consumer tools, and Google Plus still remains as a consumer tool, not as a Google Apps tool. So if it becomes ever a Google Apps tool, there are FERPA protections that are granted to you. There are a lot of skeptics about that, but at least that's what it says in the paper. So we will believe, Google Plus, because of the way it is integrated into the rest of the tool, okay, has a chance of success. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a comment about, we're working with Yale University right now. We were in a meeting last week with them that, and this is not the marketing group, by the way, it's
Yep.
the concept of social media.
Yep.
I think for them, for this particular group, takes on a bigger boundary than traditional Facebook and that sort of aspect of social media. And one of their big problems right now, the problem they welcome is, what Gartner calls the citizen developers. So they have a lot of students who are starting to build apps.
Yep.
And you brought up internal governance and started talking around that. How do you, provide the environment that encourages this sort of app store sort of concept that students can build these things that can literally be downloaded on the Yale infrastructure, right? That other students can use. And the governance was a big part of that.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if you guys would include that.
Yeah, at Wellesley, there is a very active mobile app development that's happening in the computer science department. So we are, for example, there's one artificial intelligence class which is developing a course recommendation system, okay, for students to whom we have actually provided historical data to work with the understanding that if this recommendation system were ever to become successful, they will transfer the ownership of intellectual property to us, okay, that we will further develop that for the college use. Okay, so I think we're trying to do more and more of that you can develop. And if you want it to be a college-blessed application, then for the longevity reasons, we as a IT needs to be tuned in on it for being able to offer support. Usually student code is what it is. It's written, it works, they leave, there's nobody else to follow up. And we don't want to be caught in that loop. And this partnership, I think, has a way of succeeding if this transfer, okay, will work out. So.
Well, we haven't seen a lot of app development. We're probably not that kind of school. what we see more is video development. A lot of video going out on YouTube and other things. And I saw one the other day. The students had done a video about the quietest places on campus where you could either A, study, or B, take a nap. We are right now, we're 100% commuter school, so we do have a lot of students who spend some time hanging out there between classes. So it was probably a very useful video for that audience, but I haven't actually seen a lot of app development. Now, we did actually help the students with the video development piece, but not app development so far.
Yeah, I would say at our institution we're pretty closed when it comes to controlling like the experience and technology. However, again, with recent, we've always had in the past being dispersed. We've always had students that would kind of take on creating the Kaplan Indianapolis group or whatever to meet with everybody, and they'd represent Kaplan in some way, some good, and then some we've had to go back and figure out what are you doing on our behalf, kind of things. We try to, and we try to do, now have a program. We've created a program now to allow students to apply to create a group and that kind of stuff. So it's more in the group. From the app space, be honest with you, until recently, all of the old world vendors we've used have been so closed systems to work with. There hasn't been an opportunity to create apps against them. The data just wasn't free. It wasn't open. It wasn't anything. I mean, you look at, from our SIS, our ERP to whatever, it's like, I can't even get access to it half the time. And it's like, it's an extortion-based business to me, and where they hold me hostage as to, what are you going to do about it? And so the recent movement has really helped me more than anything is getting the vendors to open up that data. And so one example is Pearson, who we're a big partner with on their Learning Studio platform for e-college is what it was before they acquired it. Very closed system. It was primarily they do for-profits online, but you couldn't do anything. It was Me Too. What I mean by Me Too is that we were just like DeVry. We had the same SIS, we had the same marketing stuff, we had the same LMS. So if you went to us, you went to somewhere else. There's no differentiation. How do you own it? So one of the things over the last 2 years we've tried to do is I don't really care about back office or what's under the iceberg. I really care about the tips. So what I've been focusing on is I just want to own integration and presentation and user experience. So Pearson, I was actually the product owner for the last 2 years on their web service on demand project, which is give me all the data as web services. And again, of course, 2 years ago now I want it completely different because the way we did it before is wrong, but it's there now. And what we did is we partnered with a group of students to build our iPad app. We launched for us in our industry, it was the first full iPad app, which is not just the classroom, but also the back office stuff, so financial aid, admissions, everything on the iPad app for our students. But we don't use them. We're not students there. So we tried a group of students. We had 2 of them co-develop with us as far as user experience, what they wanted to expect, and so that was very successful. So you'll see a lot more of that from us, where especially in the Facebook side, we have a lot of very passionate students that are advocates for us that we've kind of, I wouldn't say employed, but certainly partnered with to say, what should we do next? What's most important to you? What do you want to see? And for us, it's been, that's why you'll see a lot of heavy career services work for us, a lot of financial aid stuff for us. And really, our focus on user experience and integration is really just kind of the white glove service approach. Is like, what can we, you mentioned yesterday about the hospital chain. That's definitely what we're thinking now too is, how can we just make it easy? How can we let them focus on learning rather than focusing on how am I going to pay, what am I picking classes, how am I doing this? And you'll see over the next year from Kaplan, that's a lot more the focus is going to be how can we break down the barriers and make it easier to interact with us and partner with students and app development and mobility. So another big change from our IT perspective is every single thing we do now is developed for mobile first. Every single project is how does this work on mobile, and we'll figure out how it's going to work on the other ways.
So, I want to follow up on the resource question and connect it up to your question. See, we really need to start thinking differently. We can't keep complaining about resources because we are not going to get any more. Okay? And on the other hand, our own staff are reluctant to change the ways that they have been doing business. Okay? And that's a fact of life, and because they have vested a lot of time in being trained a certain way. So if you can't reconcile all of these things if something doesn't change. So as leaders, I think we need to start looking at creative ways to exploit some of these things. I mean, social media is what it is. If a student wants to go develop an app and hook it up to publicly available information on the web about the college, there's nothing to stop them from doing it. Course catalog is on the web. They can write neat little application. Residential life information is up on the web. Okay, these are all the different dorms. These are the number of seats available. They can pull that into a nice little app and have the students socially decide who is going to room with who. There's nothing to stop, okay, these things. So how do we work with them, okay, to exploit this in a way that we are part of it for the long-term support of, okay, these solutions, yet, okay, use them as a resource rather than complaining that we don't have resources, is the direction I think this is all going to go in the end. So because I'm not going to get any more FTE than I have.
Yeah,
I
and
might end up getting less.
And I also say that, this is the best time working in IT for me, being a developer for a long time and where I am now, is that, one, technology is very accessible. So for me, as far as companies that in the past, the large companies like Pearson and everything else is sort of like the one-stop shop. Now you have people like, okay, I got a credit card and I can go to E2, and the barrier of entry into markets now is so low that we see students building companies, we see small startups that, there is no big infrastructure cost to get into a market and be a disruptor now. So we're able to really take advantage of that. And the second thing that I really love is that because of the iPad, and the fact that every one of my execs have one or two or whatever, and the third one or whatever. Yeah, they're all using them now. Even surprisingly, the people that were so against technology or didn't even know how to use email a couple months ago are now on their iPad with their apps, and I'm showing them how to get games and everything. But because of that, I think the point was made yesterday. They want to. Why can't everything be experienced this way? And then I get the question of, we need to have an iPad app. Oh, awesome. So you're willing to spend money there because that makes sense to you now. Fantastic. So our iPad app became a huge kind of Trojan horse for us because in order to make that possible, I needed to do these other things, which makes a lot of other things possible. So it was like, we're going to create an iPad.
in a device.
Exactly. Absolutely. Exactly. It's been a fantastic year because we said, okay, you want an iPad app? Fantastic. Great. This is what I need. And it wasn't. Of course, we have to have an iPad. Of course, we have to be on Facebook. Of course, they don't know why necessarily. Some better than others. They just know we need. Our president said we need to be there first. We actually leapfrogged over iPhone. We missed the boat there because we didn't deliver. It's fine. We're gonna go to iPad first. That's the number one question I get asked. I said, why the hell did you do an iPad app? Again, our demographic at Kaplan University isn't exactly the $700 device crowd. $700 device crowd. They're just not. And our numbers have shown. However, it sort of insulated us too because we were able to launch in the market without a lot of risk as far as how the hell we're going to support this thing. Now we're seeing, it allowed us to create a lot of infrastructure. We launched, it took us about 6 to 8 months to do an iPad app. Now it took us 4 weeks to do an Android app. And now it's the Facebook app that we have is going to take even, because we're able to spend a lot of money on stuff that was not sexy at all. I couldn't go to my, our president and say, hey, I want a lot of money because I want to build services that open up the data to do this architecture, and nothing else is going to change. This was able to get us there, and it's been very exciting from a technology standpoint. It's sort of starting on this new era of openness, and we launched Google Apps as well, and we're going to run the same problem as far as Google Plus. We launched for students. We also launched it in our enterprise, and so we're looking at tie those two together. It's been fantastic. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And so now that gave us a lot of things. One, it demonstrated we're doing everything mobile, and we're able to build the infrastructure to tie in 5 or 6 of our platforms now. So we went to our ERP vendor, our CRM vendor, our LMS vendors, that you all have to open up because we can't keep doing this because we want to own the presentation integration. We need to own this. We don't want you to have this. I don't want to be forced to partner with a vendor and say, hey, Pearson, we like Facebook. Please go talk to them and integrate into your LMS. Because then when they change their roadmap or we leave, it all goes away. So yeah, so that really started something really new for us. So now we have a disconnected classroom now on the device that does everything you could do at Pearson, and it could be driven by Moodle or anything else as well.
So, quickly, talking about killer app, not necessarily social media in the traditional sense. What is actually happening in some of our spaces? The Khan Academy-like teaching and learning. So we have 3 faculty members in the college who are experimenting with flipping the classroom. I mean, in liberal arts realm, this is, leaps and bounds beyond what people normally think about. So there are faculty who record their lectures and have the students listen to it before they come to the class. And the class time is spent on collaborative, problem solving. I think this is, some of the changes that are driving using tool sets, that are all coming to the fore because of the social media revolution. Okay, they found YouTube as the way to do it.
Yeah, Agee, you are the chief. You're giving education to millions of people, right?
Well, like the open courseware and iTunes U, and all those have made possible, getting information other ways than listening to your teacher, and sitting there.
This social media, like Khan Academy, I love that name. Did it help to raise the students' score, better GPA, all that, with all that stuff going on? Did it impact that and help them to do better?
Actually, there are real case studies of K through 12. Like in California, there are some school districts that are experimenting. Talk about, data collections. These guys collect data to death. Okay, and they produce fantastic dashboards. Okay, so a teacher would be walking around with an iPad in hand, can look at which student is struggling on question number 3. So she can walk to the student and walk through the step. So there are analytics that show definite improvement, and the learning outcome improvements are shown, but it's very early in the game.
But I think we should leverage it in school, education should leverage it.
But what also happens, though, and this is, I think, the disruptive piece of this, is that now there are aggregators out there who can take the stuff that's in Khan Academy and the stuff that's in OpenCourseWare and the stuff that's in iTunes U, and they put together a whole string of like general education classes. So I can take, Algebra 1 for $150, and they have agreements with various schools that I can get my 3 credits. So instead of, signing up for a semester and paying $10,000 or $15,000, I can pay $1,000 and get a whole year's worth of gen ed classes, and then go somewhere else and pay more tuition. And that, I think, is the kind of leveraging that's going to happen, with those tools. And I think that's the thing that, if colleges and universities aren't thinking about that, they need to be. Because I think that's the thing that's going to be eating away at their business model.
I think we are very good today with our learning management system to simply take what we do in the classroom, record it, and put it out there. That's not what Khan Academy is.
Yes, right.
Okay, you need to radically rethink how you teach, not recording the classroom lecture and putting it up there. That won't get you anywhere.
But that, the olden day kind of a classroom doesn't fit the modern corporation either. This is why when we hire students into corporation, they struggle a lot the first year because what they learn, they cannot apply to what we ask them. Right? We ask them to be accountable themselves and responsible. That kind of a change, we have to change the school system.
Well, round of applause for the parents.